My guest is Debra Jasper, CEO and founder of Mindset Digital in the United States. Hi, Debra. Welcome.
Hello, Kris. Great to be here.
Well, thank you. You help leaders communicate well on the small screen, as your profile says. I'm sure you have probably a more elaborate pitch to tell us in a few words what Mindset Digital is all about.
Yeah, these days it's all about making a big impact on a small screen, right? So we are helping organizations and C-suite executives and really leaders from all walks of life think through their online presence. It needs to be 5-star. They have to think now about how they're communicating with extreme clarity, especially now that people are more distant and stressed out. And they also have to be thinking about how they're maintaining connections virtually.
Yeah. So, how would you describe, let's say, the technologically savvy leader of today? What are the skill sets that they need?
Well, first, today's leaders, we talk a lot about how audiences have changed. So, audience now, we used to say people have 8-second attention spans, they're really distracted. Now we're saying they're not only distracted, they're distant and they're distressed. And the brain science on this is absolutely fascinating. When you're stressed out, it's harder for you to listen, it's harder to learn, and harder to remember what you learned. Kris, you probably have a few times, if you're like me, a few times a week that your team communicates with you and then you can't remember exactly what they were telling you. So
Exactly.
leaders have to understand how anxiety is impacting how they're communicating, and they have to learn to communicate in a way that's short, organized, skimmable with clear calls to action. And then also in a way that drives measurable results, because people are just, we're all a nation now, nations of skimmers and scanners. And if you're not engaging me, I have many other things I can do with my time.
Yeah, so you mentioned that word. We have to learn. We have to learn a lot. I hear that all the time. Working with specialist doctors, it also feels like my customers, the doctors, they have to learn again, and they thought they finished learning. So, does it feel to you that we have to learn a lot of things in a few months that normally it would have taken years for us to absorb that expertise?
Yeah, it's really fascinating right now, isn't it? I think lifelong learning used to be kind of a catchphrase, but now it's absolutely essential. We have to be we have to be learning on steroids, I think, today, because so much is changing so fast. Every day it seems there's some new technology or something new I need to think through and I won't use the word master, because I used to teach graduate courses at the Ohio State University, and what I think is fascinating is those of us who remember the days when you used to be able to master things. My grad students don't even have that expectation now. They buy a phone and they know it's going to be outdated by the time they get it home. And so they look at mastery a little differently.
Now the list is getting longer. You mentioned the phone. There's this software I use to speak to you. There's Zoom. Now some of my customers, doctors, will tell me, I hate Zoom. I'm not tech savvy. How do you react to that type of, well, excuses?
Yeah, I know. So I was dragged kicking and screaming into this myself about a decade ago. I used to be an investigative journalist who covered presidential campaigns here in the US, which I'm glad I don't do now. But I will say that what I learned and what I work with a lot of physicians, I work in healthcare a great deal, and I tell my C-suite executives and doctors and others, you have an option. You can be reluctant to embrace these new approaches, or you can be relevant, but you can't be both.
And so how do you make them
And
more
it's pretty
relevant? What are the
simple.
outcomes when they engage with you, when they work with you? What change do you observe?
So one of the things I love is what we start with first is 5-star profiles. So we've done more than 1,000 profile makeovers online of physicians. And too often they think that their online profile is their resume, but what it really should be is not what they do, but what they love about what they do for their patients. Because I'm looking you up online these days and I'm making a decision about whether I want you to be my physician. And so I want to know, I don't want you to just be credible. I don't want to know just where you went to school. I want to know whether I like you and whether I can relate to you. And so physicians are realizing they have to learn to tell the powerful story of them. So that we start there with their online presence. And then I do a lot of coaching in the healthcare world with physicians and with hospital administrators and others just helping them think about how they have to break down all the complex healthcare information they have. Because again, patients are pretty stressed out and it's harder for them to understand what you're telling them. So sometimes doctors will say to me, Deborah, are you telling me you have to dumb it down? And I say, no, but I am telling you, you have to break it down if you have any hope that people are going to tune in and remember what you told them.
Now, you have a program called SOS Presentations. Is that also about breaking it down?
Yeah, it's actually called the SOS Habit, and that's actually about writing for action. And this is critical because in the healthcare world, miscommunication is a huge cause of patient deaths, of patient problems. And so we have to communicate with extreme clarity now, especially when people are more distant. So SOS is all about making sure that all of your content, whether it's your presentations, whether it's your email, anything that goes out the door, needs to be short, organized, and skimmable. Because again, we're skimming, making quick decisions about whether your content's worth our time.
Now, is it mainly about getting more technically savvy, learning these writing skills, presentation skills, or is there a mindset thing, as your brand suggests? Do our customers, do we all have to radically change our mindset in this day and age?
I think we do. So here's what I find in healthcare, especially, and Kris, you probably see this, but there are 3 curses that stand between us and our audience, especially in healthcare. The first is the curse of competition. People are just busy. And as I said, if you're not engaging, they will tune you out. The second, though, and we see this in healthcare a lot, is the curse of knowledge. And it's when you understand it so well, you think you're explaining it to your patients or even your office administrators, and they really don't understand what you're talking about. The curse of knowledge is when you get it, you're almost talking in your tribal language, and your patients and others are left confused. And then the final curse, and we see this in healthcare a lot, is the curse of expertise. My PhD is in educational policy and leadership. I could say it was pedagogy, or I could just say it's teaching. The curse of expertise is when you're talking to impress rather than inform. So today, I think physicians, especially in healthcare, this is even more critical. We have to overcome those curses if we want to break through the noise and get people to tune in.
I'm very curious about the treatment journey for that symptom that you just described, having those curses. How long would it take a doctor to come from, let's say, that problematic situation to being a really clear communicator?
Yeah. So here's what we do, and I love this work. It's so much fun. So when we work with physicians and hospitals and also insurance, we do a lot with insurance. They will send us, so here's some emails that I send out. Here's a presentation I'm delivering. And then we transform it for them and get it to short, organized, and skimmable. And we show them side by side. Here's your before, here's your after. And it's so fun because people will look at it and then say, they'll never go back, So sometimes we'll have them vote up and vote down on content and say, I'd never tune into that. And then we say, no, let's take a look at what you're doing. But once they see it, it's what's awesome about it is once you see it, you realize, right, I am, my language is elevated or my tone is off. We talk a lot too about tone. These days you have to prime for the positive. So we give tips like if you do nothing else, ban the word unfortunately. If you say, is the doctor available on Tuesday, don't say, unfortunately, he's booked. Instead, you'll say he's available on Thursday. Part of it is teaching people to start with what you can do, not with what you can't. But it takes a little bit of time. We will do the before and after, and then we usually walk people through 2 or 3 virtual master classes where we show them their before and after examples and then give them some very specific guidelines that they need to apply it every day.
That sounds very inspiring. I'm sure I'm not the only one listening to you saying, hey, we need that knowledge. And I'm sure some of our doctors will click on the link to your platform and to your website that we'll include. Now, Debra, having your television background, and I used to work as a TV journalist as well, so cameras to you and me mean something fascinating to work with. Some of my customers, even the lens in a smartphone, it just triggers that massive fear. Is that also part of your work, helping people overcome their fear of all these cameras?
It is, and actually, Chris, it's funny because I was a print reporter, so I worked for a newspaper. But then, I started doing more keynote talks, and then I started taking more stages, and then I was on cameras all the time. So you do adjust. But the way that we're doing coaching right now, and I love this part. It's really fun today because when we redesign a presentation, we coach in visual storytelling. I haven't had a chance to talk about that yet, but that is a new skill, becoming a more powerful visual storyteller. And when we look at presentations, we're coaching people not just in how to design a presentation, but how to apply narrative. So, a good presentation should have a powerful opening. It should have clear chapters. It should have a powerful ending. But when you add visuals, people notice that people aren't looking at them as so much because you have awesome visuals on the screen, and it takes some of the pressure off. So I've seen okay physicians deliver more visual presentations, and it takes their presentation skills to hear. And I've seen really good speakers, physician speakers who have a lot of text and a lot of jargon. And even though they deliver well, it takes their presentation skills down. So I say, if you want to be a good storyteller today, spend less time worrying about the cameras and all of that, and spend more time developing a good story.
Fantastic. Debra, what is the best approach if some of our readers, viewers are inspired, they want to learn more about your programs?
Well, of course, I'm going to say you can link into me at Debra Jasper because we teach a lot of LinkedIn, but you can also go to mindsetdigital.com, or you can email me at jasper@mindsetdigital.com. So I would love to hear from folks. As again, we do a lot of work in the healthcare field, a lot of work with physicians. We can send examples of before and after physician makeovers and all of that if people want to see what it takes. But whether you work with me or you try to do this on your own, I would just say this focus on extreme clarity is even more critical today. Learning how to write for action, learning how to present with power, and then learning how to develop a 5-star online presence. Those are the critical skills you need if you want to do business in today's more virtual, more hybrid world.
Well, thank you, Debra, for not only sharing your expertise, but also demonstrating this and walking the talk. Wishing you all the best, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Chris.